Hi, and welcome to Can You Just Sit With Me? Where I discuss hope in grief, hope in the hard place, and hope during the challenging times of life. I am your host, Natasha Smith. Thanks so much for joining me today. So, today I'm so super excited to introduce you to singer, songwriter, actor, worship pastor, John Arthur Greene. He starred on Broadway and movies, TV, and has been an American Idol contestant. And I'm so honored to call him my friend. So now I met John at church as he and I attended and served together on the creative arts team. And I'm just so excited for him to be sitting with me today and to just hear his story and his heart. So, hi, John.
Hi.
Welcome to Can You Just Sit With Me?
Thank you so much for having me. I'm honored.
So, how are you today?
I'm wonderful. Little overcast outside, but it's not going to stop the sunshine inside, right?
Yeah. All right. So again, I'm excited to have you with me today, sitting here. And so today we're just gonna talk about your story and kind of get like some, just kind of go into your story, and we'll just chat about it. And I'll ask a few questions, and just to get us started, just tell us a little bit about yourself. I gave you this like brief little bio thing that I put together, but tell us a little bit about yourself, and then you can get started on your story.
It's always daunting when somebody introduces you and you go, "Oh, we could have left all of that out."
I
And
know.
this is John, and let's get into it. But I appreciate it, and I'm honored to be sitting here with you, and that we get to have this talk. Oh, but where to start? Let's start at the beginning. I was born in June 1988 here in North Carolina. Both of my parents were ministers, and so we moved around a lot. Um, I had a brother who was 5 years older than I was, and while we were in Connecticut, which was when I was around 6 years old, my brother passed away suddenly, and and uh, as you can imagine, that was probably one of the hardest moments for my family at that point to deal with. Um, and then we moved back to North Carolina, and then I moved to New York shortly after that to start a career fully in the entertainment industry as an actor, as a songwriter, as a musician, and then was in New York for 15 years. Um, I got married, I got divorced, I uh, served from the local church to the global church. I did 5 Broadway shows while I was up there during that 15 years, and the pandemic hit. And when the pandemic hit, I was sitting in my apartment in New York City on 46th Street and praying to God, saying, God, I don't know what you need from me. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. And um, the pandemic has shut down the industry. The pandemic has taken work away. It's isolated everybody, and I'm not sure what I'm supposed to do. And he said, go home. And so I came back to North Carolina. I loaded up a truck and drove down to North Carolina and went back to my family farm in 4 Oaks or 3 Oaks and a Stump, whichever one you want to call it, depending on who you are and where you're from. And I just started working the land. I started farming. I started remodeling the house, and bit by bit, piece by piece, God revealed to me more and more that my place was to serve. And so I answered the call to serve and have been the worship pastor here in New Hope at New Hope Church in Durham for the past almost 6 months now, which is wild to think. But we met at C3 Church in Clayton, and that was an incredible place for us to worship, to serve, to grow, and yeah, and I'm extremely thankful for those friends that I met at C3 and for the amount of life that was spoken into me and the amount of kind of training that was established there. So, but definitely the relationships are the thing that I've taken away from C3 the most. But that's in a nutshell the quick abridged version from there to now. And like I said, you hit quite a few of the resume points that we don't necessarily have to go over, but that's the journey from there to now.
Yeah. I love hearing your story. Um, I know I had the privilege really listen to be in the room, I guess, at one of the youth nights when you shared about the loss of your brother.
Mm,
And I sat there and it took every ounce of whatever inside of me to not just bawl out.
wow.
And so that's, a huge reason why I wanted to chat with you today.
Sure.
And so I want you to share that as much or little as you would like to.
Yeah. Um, so my brother's name was Thomas, and like I said, he was 5 years older than I was. He was the first child, and we were thick as thieves. We were best friends, and like we were country boys. Grew up in the South. We, moved to Texas and then moved to Connecticut. And while we were in Connecticut, he passed, and it was a freak accident. It was that I happened to be at the helm of, and I was asked to be on a panel with the Red Table Talk to discuss accidental killings right around the time Alec Baldwin had his accidental shooting on set. And it's an interesting conversation, my story, because there's usually two sides of it. There are people that say, well, this is horrible and it should never have happened, and then there are people that say, let's blame somebody, and both of them are technically right. Like both sides are right, but accidents do happen.
Yeah.
Accidents, sure, can be preventable in a specific way, but if we don't, I really do believe that each thing that has happened in my life, however hard, has been part of the journey and what God needed to happen for us, my family, for us to understand what He's trying to do and to get us to the place where He needs to get us. So on August 22nd in 1996, my brother Thomas and I were playing Cops and Robbers. My parents were on their 21st wedding anniversary, and I had called him in the room. It was my turn to hide. I had called him in the room, and I had picked up a rifle. We always handled the guns. The guns were always safe. We knew how to clean them, load them, take care of them. But they were never loaded, ever. And so that night I called him in the room and I pulled the trigger. And when he turned the corner, the gun went off. And when the smoke cleared and everything, I could see his body on the ground. The rifle knocked me back. And so when the smoke cleared and he was lying on the ground, I was the last person to see him alive. And that was a realization I didn't get until I was much older. And I remember even watching films and saying, well, that's not how it happens, and you can't explain that to somebody. You can't say, oh, well, and in a movie, that's the worst time to be like, oh, by the way, that's not reality. But it's something that was hard for me to deal with. And from day one that it happened, I didn't understand it. And then I went back to school very soon after the Thomas's death and the burial and everything else. And at that point, I realized a girl I had a crush on called me a murderer. And I was 8. She was 8, and I didn't understand that. I was like, "What? I didn't mean to kill him." But actually, if we look at it again on those two sides, I was sure it was an accident, but quantifying it in a way that people can understand it, it's like, yeah, you killed somebody. And that in turn, the definition of that would be you murdered someone. And anyway, so there's a lot there to uncover, but so that's where shame set in my life, and
Mhm.
like deeply rooted shame. And so from that moment on, from 8 years old, I had this kind of cloud of shame that always followed me. You ever see that cartoon where it's like there's a cloud and it's raining on in one spot on one person, and then he moves to the left, and then the cloud moves to the left, he moves to the right, the cloud moves to the right. He's like he can't get out of it.
Oh,
That's where I was because I didn't understand it. And my family at that point, we didn't put foot to pavement to get into therapy and to work a good program where we could heal and deal and um, move forward. We just kept trucking. We were like, if we stop, we're dead. Keep moving. If we stop,
mhm.
we're dead. Keep moving. And so that was the narrative.
Yeah.
That's the narrative that I played with work. That's the narrative that played with relationships. Just keep going. Just keep
Mhm.
moving forward. Um, and so I became a workaholic. I love love, so I uh, fell victim to a lot of things in that regard, and so it's been an interesting journey. But Thomas's death was the starting point for a long road of recovery when it came to shame, and God's grace through all that is really what brought me through. But that's kind of the story of Thomas passing away, and that night it was a freak accident, and I know that it was a freak accident. I loved my brother, and it I still talk to him frequently, and we still communicate on a lot of stuff. I know he's my guardian angel, who's always on my shoulder, making sure that I'm doing things in alignment, and he's always slapping me on the wrist if I'm doing something wrong. And
Yeah.
it's hard to lose someone,
Mhm.
but it's harder to live in that shame of thinking that you are something that is not defined biblically of what God calls you to be. So,
Mhm. Wow. It's such a powerful story. Your story is just so powerful, and, just to overcome it is like the what just blows my mind, because just in meeting you and interacting with you, I would have never known,
yeah.
that you have walked through this. And so that's kind of where I want to start with. Like, I know you mentioned, like, for several years, like, you didn't do anything as far as, like, therapy. Like, how were you coping? Because one thing I like to ask people when they're guests on the podcast is, like, how did you feel, for afterwards? And I know you were so young, so it's just like a whole lot of different dynamics going on. But um, how did you get help? When did you get help, and how has that road been for you?
I mean, yeah, it's a loaded question, and I
Yeah.
think I think that for me, I didn't get help. I think that I
Mm,
started acting,
mm,
and I started losing myself in characters, and I started pretending to be somebody else so that I didn't have to be me.
yeah.
So I didn't have to look at the shame. So I didn't have to look at the fact that I was a murderer. So I didn't have to look at the fact that people who I loved um, are not here anymore because of my actions. And those were really hard things to look at. So drugs played a part in it, alcohol played a part in it, sex played a part in it, work played a part in it. Um, uh, Masking all of that pain with those things was easier than looking at myself in the mirror. And I started taking little pieces of characters that I played throughout those years and created this whole identity around it
Mhm.
and took God out of it. So after Thomas died when I was 16, I found out in the same night that my dad was having an affair, and my dad also had Parkinson's disease. And so at that time, I remember I came in the room and he was packing, and my mom sat in a chair, and I said, "What's going on?" And she looked at him and she says, "Do you want to tell him or do you want me to?" And I remember him sitting on the bed and his eyes just watering up, and him telling me, I've there's someone else, and I'm leaving. and then saying, and Parkinson's has progressed. And I remember just stopping, and without any emotion, I just said, I need a minute. And that strength, instead of reacting at that point, that strength had come from that 8-year-old who, had to live through the death of his brother, who had to sing at his brother's funeral, and always be strong for the family. So at 8, I was the man of the house, right? At 16, I was my own man. And it was all things that were kind of forced, not something that was just like, this is a decision, you know what I mean? Like it
Wow.
was, there were things that just happened. It was circumstantial, and that was the hand I was dealt. And so I stepped into it. But I think that all of those coping mechanisms came to a head when I was sitting at 19 years old. I had just gotten my first Broadway show, and I was the lead of a show called West Side Story, playing Riff, who's the head Jet, the leader of the Jets, and Arthur Lawrence, the man who wrote it. He was 93 at the time. He was the director, and just so profound as a mentor of mine, spoke so much life into me, and he said. He said, John, he grabbed my face, he cupped my face, just slapped it like this because he was so small, so short. And he reached up and cut my face, and he goes, you can get away with murder if you have passion. And I was like, it's 93-year-old man saying nonsense again, And then I sat with it, and I really go, wow, man, wow. Look back on all of these things in life of people being so passionately engaged in whatever they're defending, and they get away with a lot of stuff.
It's true.
And so when I was 19, I'd finished my first show, and I was sitting in my dressing room, and I looked in the mirror, and I called my mom, and I said, hey. She goes, oh, tell me everything, how'd it go? Oh, and I love my mom. Shout out, John Green. What up? And so I'm sitting there, and I'm on the phone with her, and I'm staring in the mirror. And I said, is that it? Mm. And she was like, what do you mean? And I sat for another second. And I said, is that it? And I could hear the air leave the room where she was on the phone. And I thought about that, and that many years later, how profound that was to say, I don't think I expected confetti cannons. I don't think I expected a parade. I don't think I expected, these rave reviews and people to come off and, shake up champagne and, squirt it in the air. Like I didn't expect any of those things. But what I expected was something inside of me to be fulfilled.
Right.
Something that I had worked for so long, and I'm at the top of my game, the height of my game. I'm 19 years old, starring in a hit Broadway show of the year. I have everything. A penthouse apartment on 42nd and 10th Avenue, overlooking Manhattan and the Hudson River. I had everything. But I was so empty and broken inside that wasn't enough. And I remember at that point going back, and God has always, here's the thing, here's the through line. God has never left me. I was the one who was running from God. At 16, I put both middle fingers up, and I was like, I can't believe you would allow something else to happen to my family. I can't believe you would allow something else to happen to me. Thinking that he's like sitting up there orchestrating misery and mayhem. He's not.
Right.
He uses the misery and mayhem that we have to go through in this earth, on this world, in this body, in this vessel. That's just the journey we're passing through, right? And he uses that for his good. Now I can sit here and tell people this story of resilience and grace through the despair of how much shame and trauma I lived through. Mm-hmm. And I can do it on a platform in front of people at a church I can do it on a platform where we're sitting here and we're having this honest conversation on a
Mhm.
podcast. And if somebody gets one thing out of it, great. If they get nothing out of it except for God's good and he comes through, great. That's
Mm.
still one thing.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so I say all this to wrap up this conversation about what happened was terrible. What I did was I prolonged the healing for a long time because I wasn't ready. I wasn't ready to be healed. A lot of us, I feel at times, need to hold on to that pain because it's so much easier to stay stuck in the dysfunction because we know it. It's what's comfortable because that's what we've been living through for so long. So when something good comes, we're like, I'm going to retreat back to the pain because I know how to control this. I can white knuckle this. You know that expression of white knuckling like
Yeah.
a steering wheel or a, you know, uh,
Mhm.
an airplane handles, when people just getting scared,
Yeah.
whatever. Just, I think so many of us white knuckle these scenarios in our lives so that we don't have to feel joy. We don't have, and then we complain about not feeling joy. And we're like, God, you're not showing up. He's like, son, you're not letting me.
Mhm.
An old minister and mentor of mine told me one time, he said, um, God can do all things, and through God, all things are possible. But the human condition allows us to render God helpless because
Oof.
he gave us free will.
Yeah, that's good.
So I always talk, my favorite talk is this kingdom versus culture talk, right? Like
Mhm.
a cultural mindset being like, be self-centered, yeah, serve yourself, make sure you got yours, you know what I mean? Like all of these things that center around self and culture and the fact that we're feeding into this narrative of the 21st century mindset where if you have more, you're going to be elevated. If you have the followers, you're going to get the job. If you have the looks, you're going to get the girl or the guy. If you've got whatever. If you got the car, you're cool. You know what I mean? Like all of these things that in the end don't matter. So then
Yeah.
we look at it from a kingdom mindset and says, oh, well, elevate other people instead of yourself. Let somebody else be more important than you.
Mm.
Sell everything you have and come follow me. Culture,
Yeah.
kingdom, it's like, you know what I mean? It's this huge atomic bomb that goes off because it's two atoms that don't mix. That's why you have to choose. When you come to a fork in the road, the cultural path of the kingdom path, which path are you going to take? A lot of us want to straddle the line in the middle. We're like, nah, I'm going to live one foot in culture and one foot in kingdom. And like, I'm going to bounce back and forth. And I'm going to have these types of friends because they fulfill this part of my life. And I'm going to have these part of friends and I'm going to be a chameleon. So
Mhm.
I'm gonna change myself when I get around these people. I'm gonna talk the way they talk. I'm gonna act the way they act. But when I get over here, I'm gonna change the way I talk. I've changed the way I dress even sometimes.
Mhm.
And so I call it the facade, right? We have this idea of authenticity that we want to live with, but it's hidden behind a veil of hypocrisy,
Mm.
the facade.
Yeah.
It'll preach.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like
Yeah.
it's a hard concept, but we don't want to look at that because when we look in the mirror, what do we see? We don't see ourselves as God sees us. We see us how culture sees us.
Mhm.
Oh, I've got a beard and long hair. I look homeless. You know what I'm saying? Like things like that, or like, or my teeth aren't white enough, or
Yeah.
my teeth aren't straight enough, or my
Mhm.
cheekbones this, or I
Yeah.
got fat on my face, or my ears stick out too much, or it's like, what, bro? Like, what's going on here? What's this narrative in our head that we've
Mhm.
got so hyper focused on vanity, again, culture,
Yeah.
that we have lost sight of what God's trying to do in our lives. And I got lost for a long time, and I wasn't ready to see myself the way God saw me because
Mhm.
I didn't forgive myself for what I had done. I was still stuck in this perpetual cycle of shame and pain and unworthiness. And that killed a lot of relationships. That killed a lot of opportunities. And it kept me isolated to where I was comfortable enough because I could deal with that. I could white knuckle that darkness and I could hold on to it. And then God would put this pinprick of light and he would say, I'm here, son. But like we want God to come in like I would say this and with revival sessions, my ministry, I say we want God to come in like the Kool-Aid man and bust through the wall and say, oh yeah, I'm here. Right.
Yeah,
You know,
it's true.
I want God to do that. Boom, I'm gonna break open. I'm gonna change this situation. I'm gonna change the narrative. But God doesn't do that. The accounts in the Bible he does that are very few and far between. Most of the time he comes as what? A whisper. Just very, very easy. But we have to get quiet enough and quiet our mind, our thought process, get away from culture and that narrative of oneself enough to hear what he has to say. And I think that's the hardest condition that we have to overcome in the 21st century is being able to create and cultivate that space where we can meet God where he is.
Yeah.
Where we are, because he's already there. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So that's kind of like that's that through line that I've been working through for years when it comes to therapy and healing and what God has been trying to do that I wasn't ready for him to have full control over because I wanted to hold on to that control. Surrender is a hard word. Surrender is a terribly hard word. It's easy for a lot of people and for me included to speak on, oh yeah, I've surrendered to it.
Yeah.
Have you? Have you? Have I? And so when we sit on our knees in a full posture of surrender with our arms lifted high and our hands, our eyes towards heaven, that's a posture of surrender.
Yeah.
But the heart still has to be in a position and a posture of surrender. And that's the hardest part. But I found when I got quiet enough and quieted everything else around me to say, God, wherever you want to send me, I will go. Nobody will understand this, but they don't have to.
Yeah.
I won't understand it, but I don't have to. I trust you, God.
Yeah.
I trust you, God, to take all the shame, the pain, the trauma, the afflictions, the lack of support from human interaction, the lack of people who want to do God their way. I surrender to your will, not mine. When I did that, petrifying. But God led me to a place where he wanted me and he could use me. I said, wherever I go, Lord, send me. Wherever you need me, send me. Not wherever I can be at the, at the top of the food chain, not where I could, get, 2 more stars on my check. God, where can you use me the most? And Lord, send me.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, wow. It's so, you said so much. It's so many nuggets. Oh my gosh, it's so much. A couple of huge things because yeah. Listeners are going to be like, rewind, repeat. It's so much good that you've said. Surrender, huge word. The healing, though, I want to focus on this part because just in this space, in the grief space, as I've, no one wants to be in the grief space. I want to be in the grief space, but as I've kind of delved more into and become part of the grief community, it breaks my heart when I see and hear so many that says, I can't be healed.
Wow.
Like this cannot be overcome.
Yeah.
And I get it though.
Sure.
I get it. And I can understand that. But I love what you said because I've been there as well, where it's like, we don't tell people we don't want to be healed.
Right.
we'll say, instead, I just can't be. Like, I wanna be, but I can't be. Like, nothing can heal this, even God can't heal this.
Yeah.
But really, we're comfortable in the
Come
pain,
come on.
and that's what you hit on, and I'm like, "Whoa, this is it.
Yeah.
That's it." I think of the story of the paralytic at the pool of Bethesda,
That's
and Jesus
38 years.
38 years, yes.
Jesus is standing in front of him, but his eyes, his focus is still on this pool. The healing is in front of him, but he's focused on this pool. But I got to go to that pool, but I can't get there. But the healing is standing right in front of you.
Yeah.
You'd rather sit there on that rug that's been your defining position for
Mhm.
38 years than lean into the uncomfortable fear of the unknown, right?
Yeah.
We're scared.
Yep. Yeah, it's fear.
So
Mm.
good. Come
Yeah.
on, pool of Bethesda. Let's go.
It's crazy. But he asks, "Do you want to be healed?"
Yeah.
And then, like you said, we come to a crossroads, because of free will, we can choose.
Yep.
Mm.
And that's another part of this is God gives us the power of choice.
Yeah.
We come to that crossroads of culture versus kingdom.
Yeah.
And he gives us the power of choice. He just wants us to choose him,
Yeah.
but we're never stuck.
Right. Oof.
We're just not. God always gives us a way out. He will always give you a way out.
Mhm.
You just have to take it. And that's a lot of the times our first thought is well, yeah, I can't be healed, and oh, I'm it's irrevocable. I'm too far gone.
Mhm.
But you're saying that, not him.
That's true.
You believe that lie, not him. That's the enemy getting a foothold and got a foothold on you.
Mhm.
So it's a much deeper conversation. But God believes you are a masterpiece because he created you in his image.
Yes.
And we want to dismantle that, or the popular word now is deconstruct that.
Oh
And
my
just
yeah.
say, oh, I'm a masterpiece, but like, what's really a masterpiece? You have people who are taking tomato sauce and throwing them on pieces of art in the name of whatever they want to throw, throw in the hat at that point, for people who have nothing to do with what they're trying to fight for.
Yeah.
They want to ruin a masterpiece because they can, instead of like stepping into the fact of revival, which is what God calls us into, and reviving us. And that's what
Mm.
he offers. And he continuously says, I'm here, I'm here, I'm here. But hate the sin, love the person, right? And that's it. Like, I hate the sin in my life,
Yeah.
but I can't not love me because I'm human.
Mm.
And I hate the fact that people have sin natures, and that is a thing that we are, from Genesis. Like that, I hate the fact that we had to go through what we had to go through.
Yeah.
But again, I love people where they are. And where they are is exactly where they're supposed to be, because that's where God needs them to be. People are only operating with the tools they have at the time you meet them, period.
It's true.
But we want them to be here or there or over here. And it's the same with ourselves.
Yeah.
We can only operate with the tools we have. So if you're trying to deal with grief and trauma and healing and you know nothing about it,
Yeah.
it's about time for you to get into some books, get into some people who know some things. And then you have to be extremely discerning within that. I always
Yeah.
pray for this when people are like, how can I pray?
Mm.
I say, I need prayer for discernment and decision making.
That's good.
I have to make a lot of decisions, not only for my team, but for myself. And
Yeah.
I want to be extremely discerning to go to God every single time before I'm like, yeah, here's your answer, you know?
Mhm.
But we will all fall short of that for
Yeah.
sure. But again, it's the going back to our source with all of that stuff. And yeah, I 100% of the time feel that grief is extremely necessary There is a process and there is a criteria that you have to work through. But if you don't know that criteria, if you don't know that process, if you don't know that system,
Yeah.
then you're paddling upstream with your hand in piranha infested waters. Like is and your boat is a newspaper. So if you're gonna sink, you're gonna get eaten, and you're going upstream, boo. Like, let's go. Turn around, get in the canoe, grab a paddle, and talk to Jesus. Like,
Yes.
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But we want to do it so hard. We want to do it in our own way. We want to do it our own way. I wanted to do it my own way. And you know, that that it doesn't make you stronger. It doesn't make you more powerful. It just prolongs the healing. It prolongs the calling. It prolongs the blessing. It prolongs the revival.
Mhm.
And but again, it's like, would I change my story? No.
Right.
But I have looked back and said, man, I guess I didn't have to do that way.
Oh.
And what would it look like if I had done it this way? Or what
Mhm.
would it look like at 19 when I realized that I was done, that that this was not what I was called to do?
Mhm.
And what if at 19 I turned back to God and said, you know what, God, okay, I did it my way for this amount of years, and now I've come back home and I'm ready to go. There's a beautiful book, and I'm trying to remember. It's called The Prodigal Son, and it's a story of the prodigal son. But what it's about, it's from Henri Nouwen, and he was a brilliant pastor and theologian and just brilliant mind. But he breaks down all three of them: the prodigal son,
Mm.
the father, and the older brother. And he says at one point in life, we are each of those.
Mhm.
Sometimes we're coming home after we've squandered everything, and we have the father who's just ready to receive us. Sometimes we're the father that is just dying to love on that person. And sometimes we're the older brother that's afflicted and is sick with envy. And if we can understand the human form in that, knowing that we at some point are all three of those at different places. And where are you right now? Where are you in this situation? Are you the prodigal? Are you the older brother? Are you the father? I mean, it just opens up
Yeah.
this whole new chamber of understanding in life, because nobody's the same through and through and through all the time. We all
Yeah.
react differently to different situations. So
Yeah.
I just thought that was super profound,
It is.
especially within this conversation of grief and trauma and resilience through that, and the grace of God through it. So
I love that, and thanks for, saying or giving reference to that because that's one thing with the podcast as well as in my book. I want it to have some practical points as well. Like, okay, I know all this. Now, what can I do with it? So that is, I love that. Just in trying to identify where are we
yeah,
at this moment. So that's, I love self awareness. Other quick thing, and then we'll wrap up. Um, because we've kind of talked about the loss of a loved one, but
yeah,
you have experienced some other type of losses. And I had a conversation with friends last night, and they're like, "Oh, I'm not sure, if I really, if I'm going to really need your book because I haven't suffered a loss of a loved one."
wow,
And I was like, "Well, it's other types of losses."
sure,
And so I kind of went into that a little bit, but your story actually kind of is an example of that because, like you said, when you found out about your dad, so that's a loss, a
yeah,
living loss,
yeah,
and as well as your career.
sure,
And
yeah,
so when I'm listening to, something you worked so hard for and you're at like the height of it all, like I'm like, oh my, like that is to me a huge loss.
yeah. Let me yeah, wow. You didn't have to ask me such a
Okay.
hard question.
I'm sorry.
No, 26 years I trained, 26
Mm,
years I worked, 26 years I put my heart and soul into telling stories and being a storyteller at the top level with the highest form, with the highest um, uh, group of people that I could be around. And I was honored to be able to do it every single time. Now, what I thought I was working towards was changing lives. I thought the storytelling that I was doing was changing lives, and it was to an extent. But what I'd started to see over the past few years in the entertainment industry was that it had lost its heart to use storytelling as a medium of art, and it decided to start censoring storytelling and claim it as art.
mm,
And that for me was a huge issue because I think through storytelling, we're able to see things in a different light that don't make any sense to us, that we don't understand, that don't look like us, and we can still gain something from it. So, what I had to mourn was 26 years of putting my heart and soul, money, blood, sweat, and tears 365 days a year, missing out on family events, missing out on relationships, suffering through having to go on stage with a broken toe or a dislocated finger or, a sore throat or, the loss of a family member that I couldn't be at the funeral for, so on and so on and so on. Whatever it would be, I had to look at it and I had to say, okay, I have to mourn this because God's called me into something different. I have to be surrendered to this, and I can't sit here and say, oh, well, I wish I could have, would have, should have done all of this, right? So what I accomplished in 26 years is huge. And I will never forget it. I will never discredit it. I will never say anything except for I am thankful that I got to be a part of that. And that's part of my story. I think it is so cool that I lived that life and I got to perform on all those stages, on all of those opera houses around the world for kings, queens, prime ministers, presidents. It's the list goes on. Celebrities. It was amazing. It was incredible. The difference is now I'm still a storyteller,
yeah.
but it's just a different medium.
Mm,
So I get to tell stories about a living, breathing
mm,
man
mm,
who walked,
yeah.
who performed miracles, and then who died for my burdens,
Mm,
for my grief, for
yeah.
my pain. And it takes me it doesn't take me long to not have to look at that past life as something negative that I'm losing, because what I'm gaining is
Mm.
the fact that every single day I get to see life change at the highest level, right?
The
Different
highest.
level, but the highest level, because the King of Kings is so good to us.
Yeah.
And so I just look at it in a different way. I will never not love storytelling. And I will always pray that storytelling goes back to a place and a time, or goes forward, excuse me. It's not never going to go back, that it goes forward to a time
Mm,
where stories and people are the most important thing, not the bottom line,
yeah.
not butts and seats, not political stances.
Yeah.
And that's a big thing for me. And so I look at it and I say, I'm thankful for what I got to do and be a part of. And I got to be a part of Broadway and the entertainment industry in the golden age. I
Mm,
mean, really, it was when art was celebrated at the highest form, right when it was changing into this commercialized art form of what it is now. And um, you know, I still love Broadway. I still love my friends who are performing. I still love my friends who are, you know, artists around the world and in TV and film and doing all the stuff. Um, but I am really in love with where I am now.
Yeah.
And so thankful that God has called me and pulled me into this place, in this space.
Whew. Well, that was a awesome way to wrap up. Um, last thing, what would you like to leave the listeners with? Just an encouragement.
Mm. That no matter where you are, no matter what you're going through, no matter what is in front of you, look down at your feet and thank God that you're still here, because he's right there with you.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. So
Thank you.
honored to have you and just sit with you today.
It's been
This
such,
has been so good to my soul.
I love you so much.
Love
Thank you.
you. Thank you so much, John. Bye.
Bye.
That brings me to the end of this episode. Thanks again for joining me, and thanks for listening to Can You Just Sit With Me? If you enjoyed the show, please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts, and be sure to come back for my next episode of Can You Just Sit With Me? Until then, this is Natasha Smith, helping you to find hope in grief, hope in the hard place, and hope in the challenging times of life. Be sure to connect with me across social media, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at I'm Natasha Smith.